Hello, welcome to The Viewpoint. I am Mamadou Mbodj. The media are proverbially referred to as the fourth estate, the bulwark of our liberties and freedoms. And journalism itself has been referred to as the first draft of history. But these lofty descriptions really belie a reputation less than reputable. Many are skeptical about journalistic impartiality and objectivity. And this is certainly not helped by the modern phenomenon of social media, which has really swamped the ecosystem, the media ecosystem, if you like, in everywhere in the world. Now, being in this situation and the media where we are right now in this country, what is our role, the role of the media in our transitional justice processes, and how can we rescue the reputation so that the media would be seen widely, would be widely acknowledged as a public good? Here to help me answer these questions and more is the Secretary General of the Gambia Press Union, Mr. Sekou Jammeh. Sekou, welcome to The Viewpoint.
Thank you. I love your introduction.
Cheers, thank you. In the aftermath of the radio closures, was it King FM and
Home Digital?
This was after the 26th of January, marched by the 3 years Jotna movement.
Yeah.
The president of the Gambia Press Union, Mr. Sheriff Bojang, said that this was a big step backward. Do you see it in such terms? I mean, given what we had just emerged out of, the era of Yahya Jammeh and what these people did, should we be worried?
We should be very much worried, and I always tell people it should be viewed within a context, and that context is that from 2017 to now, we have seen a trend whereby media rights have been violated and the state hasn't done anything about it. From 2017 March to December 2019, we've had more than 24 of violent attacks on journalists, and all these cases were reported to the police and they've not investigated anything, and in some instances some were injured, in some instances some equipment were damaged, including the GRTS camera equipment, and in all these cases nothing was done about it. So the climate of impunity that existed on the Jammeh begin to show its face again, and the state is one of a very big source of that threat of violence against the journalists. And this latest incident involving the closure of journalists actually, well, it shows that actually what Sheriff Bojang said, that it is a very big step backward. Matter of fact, as far as we are concerned, it is quite inconceivable that after Jammeh, we would have radio stations closed the way and manner in which the Home Digital FM and King FM were shut down.
That's it. And you had complained to the police about the treatment you had received and all the nasty, unsavory stuff. And
the case of Keba Jafang, which was the first one, was reported to the police. And when after Keba Jafang, Ablai John was attacked, then the ITV camera person was attacked. We went and had a meeting with the head of operations at the police. Then the GRTS crew were attacked. We went and had a meeting with the Inspector General of Police. And in all these cases, they promised us that they would look into these cases, but they've never done so.
Why do you think that?
Well, because I think the state hasn't shown any interest in the safety of journalists. If they have, or if they are really interested in the safety of journalists, which is very important in a democracy, they would have done the needful. There are a lot of international, international laws requiring the Gambia to act in certain manners when it comes to security and safety of journalists, but they've not been doing that.
Yes, but don't you think that perhaps we've been saying this, that all the institutions were vitiated, so the people there who are supposed to implement the laws, because they grew up, they had their apprenticeship, their tutelage under Yahya Jammeh, they do not know anything better?
Well, I mean, I don't know, that might be the case, but even if that explanation comes from them, I will say that, I mean, that's an inexcusable excuse. Quite frankly, you cannot, as police as an institution cannot say that when someone assaults a journalist, we cannot do anything about that because we were where we were. No.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So without the police, is there any other agency where one can lay complaints? One wonders.
Matter of fact, we have started conversations with the Attorney General to see how best we can put in place a legal framework that will strengthen the protection of journalists. We are actually looking into having a special law which will make criminal assault on journalists. Of course, in any country you go to, there are civil and criminal laws that actually address issues like assault on anybody, and journalists are just, any other person. But the question we always ask is, if those laws are here to protect everybody, why is it that they are not applied when it concerns journalists? So maybe we need a specific one.
Absolutely, but you'll also consider that we've got all sorts of laws in our books. Always the problem is implementation. This has always been the problem. You may have wonderful laws in your books, but if the IG of police or anybody else, any other authority, wants to do something contrary to what they should be doing, then it's a problem there, isn't it? Then you are left with going to the courts, and that costs money. The journalists is really in a very difficult situation.
In this case, the GPU and all the journalists here will be there to help them implement it. Yes, we will be here to help them implement.
So you're quite confident in that. Once we've got the legislation, then everything would follow.
Well, the legislation will mark a very important step towards ensuring or promoting the safety of journalists in the country.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And still, of course, this is all in the background of still the media laws, the inimical to media freedom. Those laws are still intact.
Well, not so much, because you remember, a lot of these anti-speech laws are in the criminal code. Laws like criminal defamation, sedition, false news, and of course in the Information and Communication Act, that's where you have the false publication on the internet. But in 2014, we challenged some of these laws before the Supreme Court, and we've had some victories there. In fact, the Supreme Court says that criminal defamation is unconstitutional, which is in the criminal code, and also false publication on the internet, which is the most obnoxious law, is also unconstitutional. So with regards to sedition, they actually severed it, and they kept some, and then they declared some as unconstitutional. For false news, they said that is quite constitutional. So we have false news to deal with. We have a section of sedition to deal with. But the good news is the criminal offences bill that is before the parliament, that is going to repeal sedition in its entirety. It is going to repeal criminal defamation in its entirety, and false publication on the internet. You have another separate amendment bill to an amendment to the Information and Communication Act that is also before the parliament, and that also will repeal false publication on the internet in its entirety. But then false news will still be there. Yeah.
And that's the next fight.
Well, false news is the next fight, because it's not a good law. It's not a good law, really. Yeah.
And the media bill, there was where apparently they have suggested that there would be an independent authority, well, were different from the media.
Well,
is that still there?
Well, yeah, that hasn't been tabled before the parliament yet, because the Ministry of Justice decided to shelve that. I mean, and the thing is that we are not opposed to having an independent regulator. What we are opposed to is what we are concerned about is how independent will that regulator be, and how that will be is in the provisions that are made in the law, in the bill. And when we looked at those provisions, we realized that there are fundamental flaws there, and they are not in line with international standards. Then we went to them and said, we can't go ahead with this. I mean, let us allow industry and public consultation, strategic public consultation on this. Matter of fact, I mean, it's not enough that people sit in their offices and draft laws for journalists. Laws that are made for journalists or to guide journalism in this country, they should be subject to scrutiny by media experts and by concerned stakeholders.
Yes, but one would like to think that before these laws, these bills were drawn up, there was consultation with GPU?
Well, there was some consultation with the GPU, but then consultation stopped at where we told them, now here is where GPU as an institution would want you people to invite media experts to look at this. I cannot sit in my offices and claim to be a media expert and speak on behalf of everyone. Matter of fact, what you face in this newsroom here is unique to your experience. So you should be given an opportunity to look at that bill and advise the GPU appropriately. But without that, GPU just looking at it and say, okay, this is fine and go. That's not how we want to operate.
Do you have a fear that perhaps the government really will treat all these bad laws sort of like a la carte, pick and choose? They perhaps leave some in there for their own benefit.
Well, false news is one of them that they want to keep. And we told them it is not a good law, because when you look at it, I once said this to one information minister, that when you look at it, governments anywhere in this world are the biggest peddlers of news that is false. But then no one goes after government, all right? But then when a journalist, even with an honest mistake, I mean, publishes or broadcast false news, then you come after that journalist. And then it also depends on, I mean, who are we talking about? Obviously, if it is GRTS and then it benefits the state, or even if it is QTV and it benefits the state, that false news benefits the state, they wouldn't come after the people. But when it antagonizes the state, then they will come up. So the issue of disproportionate application and selective justice and abuse of that power will come into play.
Yes, but shouldn't there be any regulation, any law regarding false news or misinformation or disinformation? Shouldn't there be rules regulating that sort of thing?
And even when it comes to false news and, you know, misinformation and a disinformation aspect of things, we usually tell them this is not the game for journalists. Journalists are victims of disinformation. We are victims of misinformation. And disinformation is by intelligence agencies, it's by government, it's by corporate entities. I mean, these are the kind of people that are engaged in disinformation and not journalists. We are victims of it. We will be very much interested in having some form of regulation in place that will address the issue of disinformation, but then that law shouldn't be targeted at journalists. In fact, we are targets of disinformation and victims of it too, because journalists, when you are sometimes sloppy in this age of technology, digital technology, you can be used as a vector for disinformation.
Absolutely. So now, when you look at the ecosystem, the media ecosystem right now, for GPU, what's the vision?
What's the
vision? How are you going to change things really to address our needs today?
Over the years, we have been so much concerned about the media, the legal environment for journalists and the political environment for journalists, and even the economic environment for journalists. Because these are so important. They influence what happens in the newsrooms. And from 2020, January, we decided that now, going forward, we are going to focus on the bread and butter issues for journalists. When you look at media houses in this country, I mean, it is sad that in a lot of situations, I mean, journalists work without an employment letter, which is a violation of the labor rights of the journalists. Journalists work without social security benefits. Journalists work, I mean, sometimes some don't get paid for a few months, actually. A lot of times journalists work for very long hours without actually any compensation for that. In a lot of situations, even, it is a question of underemployment for a lot of them. Some don't go on leave at all because, you know, journalists are usually very much passionate about their work, but that doesn't mean that employers should abuse them. Now, we are going to look at the things that directly addresses the felt needs of journalists. And that's why, I mean, I told you earlier, we are launching a survey on the working conditions of journalists, and that is going to guide our intervention going forward. But we want to have an environment where every journalist will be able to live a respectable and decent life. A journalist that cannot afford his fare to go for news coverage is a danger to democracy. A journalist that is not given enough money by the employer to write good stories independently is a danger to democracy. So that is why our focus now will be not just on capacity building, because we've been doing a lot of capacity building. At the GPU school, the university also has a faculty now inside training center. You have some training schools now for journalism in this country. And then the GPU will continue to roll out ad hoc training programs like 1 week, 2 weeks, based on emerging issues and issues that we think are very important. But then going forward, our focus is now on the bread and butter issues for journalists. Absolutely. And of course, their safety.
Of course, but the training aspect, you've touched on the training aspect, but I've heard so many news editors, I've heard so many editors that some of the journalists we're getting now, those being churned out by these journalism schools, their language, for instance, that's a bread and butter issue, because I use language really to convey meaning and that sort of thing. It's really poor. What do you make of that?
Well, so, I mean, I wouldn't say, you have some cases, you know, when you read some papers, of course, or you listen to some radio stations or even watch television sometimes, as a journalist, you are quite shocked and sad at what you see or hear. But I think when I go to University of the Gambia, when I go to the Media Academy, and even at Inside Training Center, I do interact with some of these kids that are coming up, and they are very, very brilliant kids that are coming up. I think in the next 3, 4, 5, 6 years, the Gambia actually will have a very a crop of very interesting and very talented journalists who can write and articulate issues really quite well. I am not worried about that at all. I do know that, yes, as we speak, we have quite a number of journalists who maybe don't have the kind of competences and, like what Joseph Pulitzer will also call, the trained intelligence to be able to do the work. But I mean, the future looks really bright, because you know, let me tell you one thing. Before 2017, some kids will come to our office and they will be in tears, they will cry. And you ask them why. Very brilliant kids. They will tell you, I want to do journalism. My parents don't want me to do it. And they will cry. Some will even get enrollment and they wouldn't come. Now, some of the kids are talented and have that kind of dream, do not have that kind of obstacle. They are allowed to pursue their dreams at those schools. They're very talented kids.
Absolutely.
Very talented.
I mean, we do here, whenever I hear somebody tell me that I want to do journalism, I ask, oh my God, why? The money, the pay is not good. I mean, it takes a toll on your energy. Some people do say that by the time you are 40, as a journalist, you are finished.
Yes.
Because it takes so much energy.
Yes.
So, and then even when I look at you, do you like reading? You know, it's here really, I meet journalists who don't really read. I just don't understand the two. So there are certain attitudinal blocks, barriers, because one gets the impression that perhaps some of these people are more interested in the celebrity nature of that than in the hard work, the hard graft, and not much pay. I mean, you have to be genuinely passionate to go into journalism.
Yeah. Well, journalism is all about that. It's about the passion that drives you, and it's about some sense of self-fulfillment. You know, when you travel from here, you leave your comfort area. You go all the way to probably my village in Nyomi Sidanunko, and then you see the living standards in my village. And then you know that someone somewhere could have done something that will improve the standards of living in that place. And you write about it. And as a result of your writing, someone gets some upliftment. That is great. If someone is, facing injustice. Like one American comedian who defines journalism as a trade where, people who afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. Now, if you have someone who is faced with injustice, and as a result of your journalism, your great journalism, that person has justice, that is great. That is really great. And this is something that I have faced personally. Where I walk into people's houses, I left their houses crying. But I was very much motivated when I get back to my newsroom, because I knew that what I was going to write was probably going to change their lives. And it did in some instances. That is great. There is no other trade that is in this world that is noble, that is more noble than that. There is no other trade in this world that is greater than that.
And these are the attitudes we need to inculcate.
Well, yeah. It is not about the glamour. And I usually tell those that are younger and particularly want to do journalism. I'm always curious. I was like, but what kind of journalism do you want to do? Oh, I want to have my TV host. I was like, okay. I think you need to start somewhere. Yeah. Yeah.
At the bottom.
Yeah.
Often you do.
Well,
as a reporter, as a cop.
Yeah, because to be a program host, I tell people, I mean, the more knowledgeable you are about issues in your country, about the people of your country, about the world, the more competent you become as a host. But if you just jump from nowhere and then you want to host a program and dress nice, well, it's not going to work. I mean, you might have few instances where it works, but I mean, the experience is most of the times it doesn't work.
Yes,
yeah.
That's very true.
Yeah.
We formed the Media Council,
yeah,
isn't it? And I understand that the twin pillars, if you like, of your focus is mainly code of ethics,
yeah,
and the training.
Yeah.
So tell us, how far have we gone in that?
Well, the Media Council, I think the biggest challenge that we faced was to get the right executive secretary. Because the Media Council, it is designed in such a way that it should be independent of the industry, but it should also be independent of the government. So to have that, you have to have an executive secretary who is very competent. And then it was a very, very rigorous process of recruiting someone. But the other bodies like the Governing Council, that is already set up. In fact, it's a 12-member Governing Council, and you have a representative of the government sitting on the panel. And then we also have the Ethics Panel, which is a 3-member panel. So now the executive secretary, have great news, 1st of March, someone has started work at the Media Council as the executive secretary. So probably we'll soon see a lot of activities around the Media Council. This is a very important project because the model that we have here, if we embrace it, it could be the best model in the world. Because when we were designing this model, more than 20 experts have been consulted. I have personally consulted more than 20 international experts, and I have looked at more than 70 Media Council models in the world, in Africa, Europe, and even Northern America. And then that was what informed the kind of model that we have here. It's a very hybrid kind of model, and I'm very much interested to see how things will unfold at the council. But then I think it's a very great model that we have. Yeah.
What would be its powers?
Well,
sanction.
Well, in terms of the powers, the constitution that everyone adopted in the end, I mean, has some sanctions there. Well, a lot of the times people want it to have a lot of teeth to bite. Okay, but then what we are also looking at is that how do we have a complete package? A complete package in the sense that in terms of ethical journalism, we will have it imbued in the individual so that the code of conduct that we have, in fact, it is currently under review, and this month we will call everyone to look at the code. The code of conduct that we have, we print enough of it so that every journalist gets it, and then you put it at the back of your pocket so it becomes your Quran or your Bible. At that level, it is there. Then you move from there to the level of the media houses. How do we make sure that every media house in the Gambia has editorial guidelines? Because we know that more than 95% of media houses don't have standard editorial guidelines. Now, what we are going to do is to bring about some consultancy where we're going to develop standard editorial guidelines, and every media house can take and customize according to how you want it.
I said I was going to come to that,
yeah,
because in the end you have to customize.
And then you have to customize, yeah. So, but then even at the level of the media houses, how do we promote accountability? And that's very important, because when you, as a journalist, for example, when you broadcast or publish something that offends me, my first point of call should be the media house. And that media house should create a mechanism for me to be able to do that. We usually tell people, when you look at Observer of before, and you know, even Point of before, the editorial page, usually they have, if you have any queries about our writing, write to us or call us. Now those columns have disappeared. I mean, I was told Citizen FM used to have a radio program that is for listeners, all right, who will call in and say, no, we don't like what you said about this particular program. We don't like what you said about that particular program. How do we bring back some of those programs at the TV level, at the radio level, so that there will be that accountability and interaction with the audiences and the public, so that the issues that the Media Council will even address will be very minimal. But then when it comes to that level, that's the national level, apart from having the mandate to monitor how compliant journalists are or otherwise with the code, they will also have a promotional role. They will be there to engage journalists, to talk to them, but also to promote media literacy in the community so that people know and understand the work and role of journalists. Because a lot of the, the issues that, journalists usually encounter, I believe it is as a result of low understanding of the role and work of journalists.
Exactly. With the GPU, a membership is voluntary, isn't it? Would you like to see it compulsory?
Not at all. Because freedom of association, if people want, let them set up a parallel GPU. I mean, because it's freedom of association. But we thank God in the Gambia, since the GPU was allowed to set up in 1979, it has been the GPU for everyone. And I would love it to continue like that, so that we have one body that we all know and we all trust is here for everyone, of course. But then I wouldn't want to see it compulsory. In fact, when you look at the way we operate, I mean, we do not discriminate against people that are not registered. I mean, of course, now we are beginning to do some form of it, because, it's not fair, because every member pays subscription. So, and that subscription helps for the upkeep of the union. So we want to see everyone become a member. But a lot of our programs will be for free for members and non-members. When you are in trouble, we will still come to you, but probably there will be certain services that you may not enjoy if you are not a member. And I wouldn't want to see that. But then I think, yeah, the popular opinion within the GPU, that's the membership, is that now we need to put in place certain measures, yeah.
Yeah, but would you like to see something like a kind of licensing scheme? Before I can become a journalist, there's an authority I have to satisfy that I have certain skills and that sort of thing.
Well, because that will very much be in line with, it will not be in line with international standards, all right? And then what at our level we're trying to do in order to, bring a semblance of that, and which wouldn't violate the international standards, is that we have rolled out press card issues, all right? And then we have set up an ethics panel or ethics committee. So this ethics committee is a multimedia stakeholder committee where if you file for a press card or a press jacket, your application will go to this committee. And this committee, it includes publishers, media owners, editors, and some other advocates. So they will look at your application and see whether you are worthy of having a GPU press card or a journalism press card, or if you are not worthy of having it. But then that will still be voluntary. And then what we are trying to do, but in UK and in France actually, when you have NUJ press card, it comes with a lot of privileges and a lot of benefits. In France also, when you have the Journalist Union press card, what we're trying to do is to promote something like that at the level of the state, at the level of the private entities, to try to talk to them, and even at the level of the security, so that we can have a great deal of understanding with them and tell them that when you go to protest or maybe some situations like that, and you see anyone with a GPU press card, know that the person is a journalist. Don't touch that person. So these are some of the benefits that will come with the issue of the press card. But licensing scheme will not be in line with international standards, and we try to make sure that anything that we are doing is in line with the parameters that have been set at regional and even international level.
Absolutely, there are international standards, no doubt. But I have heard this argument made that made in the context of Africa, that because of our socio-economic situation is really quite different, why can't we articulate a type of journalism that would address our needs and priorities and aspirations, given the way our society is? Like, would we dare to innovate, as it were? We've had this argument made, and I'm sure you've heard it made, but you don't buy that at all. There are international standards, one way of doing journalism, if you like, and that's it. Is that your argument?
Well, innovation is very important. In fact, when you look at it, we are behind, media innovations, actually. We're behind quite. Innovations are very, very, very important. But then, when it comes to the rules, there are, we may not be able to say, okay, this is African journalism, this is Gambian journalism. I mean, the rules, journalism in the Gambia should be the same as journalism in the UK or in France, because, you know what it is, actually, what journalism is all about. I don't need to elaborate on that. But then journalism is just journalism. Of course, it needs to be contextualized, because it is very much influenced by cultural and social norms.
That was exactly the point. Because of such influences, such local, really, influences, then perhaps the inflection would be different, if you like, from one society to another. Some people will say, when you look at US journalism and you look at British journalism, they tend to think that perhaps US journalism tend to ally more with power, unlike in Europe, in Britain. This is what they're saying anyway. But you can see how local inflections can change the way you practice some of these things.
Well, yeah. I quite agree. But then the societal or the social and cultural norms shouldn't influence it to an extent that it will affect the core values of journalism. And I think the core values remain the same, such as loyalty to the truth, loyalty to the public, and holding the power accountable to the people. I think, and being independent and balanced in how you do your work. It doesn't matter whether I'm a Muslim. If I see an injustice being meted out by a Muslim, my calling requires me to actually, hold that person to account. I think those core values should remain. But of course, even as a very liberal-minded person, of course, I'm always aware of my environment, and I try to make sure that but then the core values actually should remain the same. There is this person who wrote, a chapter in one of their books called, is there such a thing called African ethics? So she tried to justify why people usually, journalists in Africa, accept money when they go for coverages. And it's a very interesting thing. Of course, there are certain things that I read in there that I wouldn't agree with. But then
we accept money in all sorts of other areas as well. No need to just pick on one.
Well, She was trying to justify, to say, and it happens in the Gambia too. When, as a journalist, there is a conference at Karaba, for example, you leave your home not having breakfast because you probably couldn't afford to have the kind of breakfast that you want. And then you are not sure whether the money that you have in your pocket will be able to take you back to your office and to your home. And if you go to your office, there is no allocation for you. And someone says, okay, since you've now come, to cover this program. I'm going to give you $500. Should you accept it or should you not accept it? That's a dilemma.
That's the question.
Yeah, you know.
Yes.
But then I think.
So, but one realizes that without that self-sufficiency, as so to speak, the independence bit would be very difficult to retain.
Well, yeah, and that's why we encourage media businesses in the country to try to adopt some sustainable media business models, because the models that we have in the country, across the country, I mean, for that matter, are no longer sustainable. Media houses in more advanced countries with this kind of business model are crumbling. How about in Africa? We need to innovate. We need to have some new business models. They are there for us to explore. And then we need to have good structures in our newsrooms that will support sustainability. Because that is a problem in a lot of newsrooms. In the Gambia, in a lot of media houses, we do not have the kind of structures that will support financial vibrancy, that will support sustainability. It's not there. And we need to take it a bit more seriously. And that's why we tell media houses, let us embrace sustainable media business models. I mean, of course, the state has its part to play, whereby they need to cut all the kind of taxes that they place on media. Because when you look at the tax regime that we have in the country, we know that it is made out of censorial motive. That's very clear. So why not, as a democracy, even if we are not going to give tax credits to the media, which is happening in a lot of countries actually, even in Senegal, they give tax credit to the media because they have recognized the media as a fourth estate, and they recognize the educational and informational role that the media plays in society, so they give media tax credit. But what we are telling the government is, even if you are not in the position to give tax credit, or you are not even convinced enough to do so, why not you remove the taxes? Why not you remove it? But then, so far, we've not got that. Media in the Gambia pays a lot of tax, actually.
That's exactly the case. I mean, we studied journalism in Britain, and it was a similar experience.
Yeah.
They had to remove stamp duty, which made it somehow profitable.
Oh, yeah.
And there was the Free Education Act
to
definitely provide the public who could read, and then democracy made it relevant.
No, definitely. Definitely.
Exactly what happened.
Definitely.
So now, what should be our role now? For instance, when King FM and Home Digital FM were closed, the reason we were given was that they were inciting violence. And right now we are in a transitional justice process. Whether you believe what they said or not is a matter of judgment. One would have to go and listen to what they were saying to actually decide whether that was true or not. But surely the situation we are in right now, there has to be what they call conflict-sensitive reporting, given the situation right now. What do you say to that?
I mean, you see, so we have recognized that there is a need for some conflict-sensitive reporting in this country because the times are quite delicate. But we have also recognized that the government, in particular, has created a false narrative. And that false narrative is that we are not as secure as you guys think we are, and therefore what we need to do is that we need to restrict the way people behave, which is quite ridiculous in my opinion, because when you look at King FM and then you look at Home Digital FM, the question that we kept asking them is that, what is this information that you said they said was insightful? Where is it? They couldn't give me any evidence. They couldn't give you any evidence. They couldn't give anyone any evidence. All right? But you know, the government did not act out of good intentions. If they had acted out of good intentions, they would have acted within the rule of law. And they've not done that. Because the law is very clear. You go to Public Utilities Regulatory Authority. We made consultations with them. King FM, you know, is one of the newest radio stations on Home Digital since 2017. Now, when you look at them, you go to PURA, that's the regulatory authority. Not a single complaint has ever been filed against these two radio stations. I think that's where the starting points would have been. Because the law provided procedures for issues like that. If you think that something is wrong elsewhere, lodge a complaint. Now we have created an institution, and the state doesn't trust that institution and is even undermining not only the law but the institutions that it has created. And then we further asked them, did you advise for the closure of King FM and Home Digital? They said, no, we didn't do that. And the law is very clear. Since it is only the minister that issues permits, only the minister can actually revoke that, and that's the information minister. But on the recommendation of the Public Utilities Authority. And the minister also, you've heard him said, the orders didn't come from his office. Now, but where is the rule of law? All right? But the standards are that...
Where are the orders coming from?
Where are the orders coming from? It's like the Jamaica kind of system. Now, the standards are that if I am having this viewpoint program, because it's a broadcast program, all right? And you think I am talking in a way that is not in line with the law, what you can do is to come in and say, you cannot wait for tomorrow to file a complaint. What you can do is to come in and say, here I am, a police guy who am from Pura. I have been authorized to come and tell you to stop your program because it's not in line with the law. If I do not stop, then your next move could be you come and then you close. That's what happens. In this case, you don't just go and then send paramilitary guys to someone's radio station. Media house, the legitimate representative of the people in that, is not like a bread shop that you can just go and evict and close. For Christ's sake, we are talking about the fourth estate. We are talking about the most important institution of democratic governance in a country. You do not just go and take some paramilitary boys and say, shut down this place. That's what a rogue state do.
This is what we've been getting.
That's what we've been getting. In 2012, the same thing happened with the Daily News, with Taranga and with Standard. When NIA operatives just came, 3 of them, and say, we've got orders that you should cease operations. But where are the orders from top? You follow top, you go up to probably God, you don't get any answers. And
they all tend to rely on the 1997 Constitution,
isn't
it, for such powers.
Well, but the law, even the 1997 Constitution doesn't provide for any such thing. The law in the Gambia is very clear. Even the law, the international law is very clear on this. You do not do that. It's very undemocratic. I don't know who advised this government to do this kind of thing, but this is very scary, Mr. Mboj. And I want Gambians to take this quite seriously. This is very serious. You see, between 2005, all right, up to the time that Jammeh left, Mohamed Jai is a business person. He could have set up a radio station. He could have set up a television station, but he wouldn't want to do it in an environment where someone can just walk in and say, because Mr. Mboj said this and that, so you got to shut down. No law in place. So investor confidence in the media started coming back, and then now that is under threat. You understand? And even because when it comes to the rights of journalists, it's not just about my right, your right to sit here and say what we want to say. It's about the right of also the public to hear what I am saying, because they have that right. So it's not just about the journalists, it's also about the people. And when you look at it, the Citizen FM incident, they shut down Citizen FM simply because they were doing news. Taranga FM came in 2009, and they started copying the Citizen platform, the Citizen format. They shut them down. They started again, they shut them down. The fourth one was in 2012. Now, what happened after that? All the radio stations that were in the country were doing sports and entertainment. They were not getting any current affairs information. What happened? We were all ignorant of what was happening. And that's why when the TRRC happened, when the Jammeh Commission happened, everyone was like, wow, so all these things were happening in the country, we didn't know. But how would you know when the media was constricted and restricted? And that's where I am coming in. If they shut down King FM and we don't do anything about it, they shut down Home Digital, we don't do anything about it, they're going to shut down each and every person that dares to dissent.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Who was it, the newspaper editor who once remarked that true news is really what someone somewhere wants to conceal from you.
Well, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Everything else is advertising.
Everything else is advertisement. I mean, yeah, true news, that's what true news is all about. It's all about. And media actually and press freedom is based on freedom of expression. And freedom of expression, the fundamentals of it, is that I don't have to tell you what you like. Matter of fact, I should be telling you what hurts you. Yeah,
absolutely.
quite frankly.
Yes.
Particularly the state.
Yes. And now for us, our situation is that we shouldn't only be watchful of our governments, but also financial institutions, international financial institutions. They're all over the place. And donors. So there's a fear that you will have a donor-driven news agenda. You know, I have to say I cringed when the Chinese came over here. I mean, the Chinese ambassador invited all the media houses. I said, be careful, the one who paid the piper determines the tune. So we are at risk of these things. We should be very, very watchful and look at every agreement we're having with these people, scrutinize for people exactly to know what's going on. We are in a very vulnerable situation right now.
Well, and that is why the media in the Gambia should be very, very free to do what it thinks is right. And in terms of providing infrastructure, in terms of providing capacity building, the state has actually the biggest stake in it, because the state is the primary duty bearer. The media should be provided with capacity building, the media should be provided with infrastructure so that it can play its rightful role in the Gambia. When you look at the 1997 Constitution, as bad as we think it is, it has given the media a preferred role in the constitutional arrangement, where it is only the media that the Constitution says that it is your duty, this is a duty placed upon you, to pursue the objectives of this Constitution and hold the government accountable to the governed. Only the media. That gives us a special status in the constitutional arrangement. Now, in terms of providing all the infrastructure, all the frameworks that we need to perform our functions, that is the primary responsibility of the state. And when you look at what is happening in the country, we are having a democratic transition, and we are also having a transitional justice program. These are very critical. It's a very critical moment in this country. We have a nation to build or rebuild. And in building that or rebuilding that, we shouldn't even have any doubts about what we think the building blocks should be. And the building blocks should be when everyone in this country is free, like Milton says. I mean, give me the liberty to know, to say and utter freely above all other liberties. That's what we need. Then we know what the truth is, because the truth will then be contested in that marketplace that we say of ideas. The truth will be contested there, and then we know what the truth is, and the truth is what then will guide our actions. Because then we will all recognize that no one, not even the state, has monopoly of what the truth is. That should be our building block, and that's what we should all protect, that space. Yeah.
Absolutely. There's often a link drawn between media freedom and development. These things are now common topics of conversation. Some people call it developmental journalism. Some people call it impact journalism. There are all sorts of names for it. And when we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, there are all sorts of instruments. What should be our role? Advocacy or debate? Because there's often this pressure, as it were, or the two are not mutually exclusive.
I mean, at some level there is a convergence, but I will go in for a debate rather than even an advocacy. I will rather prefer a media that creates a platform for people to debate, and that platform should be very credible for people to debate, rather than the media taking the lead role in advocacy. I think once that platform is created, I think that's the best thing that the media can do for country. But of course, like you said, now a lot of adjectives are coming into play. I mean, peace journalism, development journalism. I mean, the only kind of journalism I like to hear is investigative journalism. Apart from that, all others, I think, are just some adjectives attached to journalism. But then, you see, even when it comes to development, we're talking about development that is sustainable and that is inclusive. And that is even where the media comes in. Because when you build a road in Basse, then we go there and see how much did it actually cost to build this? Could it be done actually with probably, fewer boutiques or fewer dollars?
What was the bidding process like?
What was the bidding process like? I mean, but who benefits from this road? I mean, why did you even do it in the first place? Is this a priority? We look at how nice the road is, but we go, I mean, probably some 100 meters down, we find a household that is even struggling to put food on the table. We say, okay, you've put like $20 million dollars on this project. But how about that household that doesn't even have food? They're going to die. That's what we're talking about. That's what people should, that's how people should see the role of journalists in development. That's how people should see it. When you go to, when you see China, for example, and their interventions in Africa, you go to China, you see, for example, they will build like, hundreds of meters of bridge. And then you look at the amount of money that they used to do that. You come to Gambia, or you could go to some other parts of Africa, you see that actually is 4 times that amount and, a smaller one. You begin to ask, but why is the rest of the money? But why did it take this big? But who's got some cut elsewhere? I mean, that's what the role of media is, and that's how people should see and understand it.
People and governments mainly to see that the media, they are really partners in this. They need the media for their overall scheme, whatever they want to do.
Whatever you want to do. And that is between media and government, all right? But let's say between media and the people. Can you just sit down and imagine a situation where, there will be no newspaper in the country. There will be no radio station. There will be no television. There will be no information on the internet. Where do we get information that will inform us on a daily basis about the things that we're supposed to do, the weather, where to go, and how to go about it, the markets, where are they, what am I going to find there, healthcare centers, how are they, where am I going to find them, the coronavirus thing, how do I prevent myself? These are things, that information very vital that we need from the media on a daily basis. Can we sit down and say, okay, let's imagine a situation where there is none of this. What is going to happen to us? And that is why Joseph Pulitzer, or not Joseph Pulitzer, that's why Thomas Jefferson says, if he were to choose between having a government without newspapers and having newspapers without a government, he would rather have newspapers without a government. Because he knows the newspapers can play the role that a government can, but government cannot play the role that newspapers can.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is in the newspapers that we have what they call the intellectual conversation of a country.
Oh yeah.
Of a nation,
oh definitely.
Nation,
definitely. Because it's like the government is here and the governed is here and then the bridge is here. Absolutely. And the media is the bridge connecting the government and the governed.
Absolutely.
Without that bridge, there is no government, there is no people.
You're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
And perhaps an added responsibility really is that, and the charge that has been put on media practitioners is that we tend to focus on the negative things. You can see this, what they call Afro-skepticism in the international media. Yes, there are so many things wrong, but yet you've got examples like Cape Verde. You've got few examples. How do we balance and just this negative perception? Because to be quite honest, not everything is entirely negative.
Yeah. Actually, you see, the media itself is evolving. And now you are having a lot of strands of journalism. You see some that focus entirely on development issues. But and people usually take that to mean, okay, you know, bad news doesn't, good news doesn't sell. That's why people, so they kind of like, we have what we call the commodification of news. And that is very risky as a people if we try to look at what the journalists produce based on what we think is the market value of it, when we do not actually know what the market value of that is. A lot of the times what the journalists produce actually don't have any market value. It's in the public interest. If you see them focusing on crime and courts, it's because they think the public has an interest in it. The journalists always look at what the interest of the public is, not how much money is going into my pocket. And people should really understand that. When I say that, I don't mean that market is not a factor, it's a factor. But as far as journalism is concerned, it is of secondary consideration. The primary consideration of every journalist and every media house is the public interest consideration.
Yes, finally we're coming to the end. Perhaps just very quickly here. Now social media, it has blurred all sorts of lines.
Yes.
Because we have editorial control, so you have somebody to answer to. Social media, one can just put in anything.
Yeah.
So now, by association, now it seems the whole media has been tarnished.
Yeah.
Liars and all sorts of things. We are called all sorts of names, confusing sometimes the message and the messenger.
Yes.
Last word there.
Yes. Yes.
Last word there.
Well, the thing is that, let's look at it this way. You have journalists, okay? People like you and I who can call ourselves journalists. And then you have journalism. Now, there are people who are not journalists, but then they can engage in journalism. And we can't stop them from that because we have what is called the democratization of the media. And this is from the top level. Even the UN Human Rights Council made a decision to say journalism is a profession that we journalists share with other people because it is based on freedom of expression. We share it with bloggers. We share it with simply anyone who wants to have a view. All right? So the media itself is democratized. So what we need to do is to do a lot of media and information literacy so that the public, when they see information, they will be able to critique the source and know this is credible and this is not credible. But the onus also comes to us as journalists and media houses. Digital media is just a technology, and it's a platform for us to use and enhance the credibility of journalism. So that when someone sees someone on another person's platform, the person will say, okay, in order to verify this, let me go to QTV platform and see whether it's true. Now, when they go to QTV platform and they see it's not true, then they will begin to doubt. Then that will boost the credibility of QTV because they will make sure that what is there is verified. And that's what we do. We publish verifiable information.
Precisely. What we need here for democratic journalism to work is to have democratic citizens, democratic viewers, democratic readers of the news. Thank you very much, Mr. Sekou Jammeh. It's been very enlightening, wonderful conversation there. And thank you very much, the viewers, for joining us on The Viewpoint. I'm Mamadou Mbouch. Until the next time, goodbye.